The Chargers can beat the Chiefs by forcing Kansas City into a structured offense, targeting Mahomes' current weaknesses and tailoring the offense to survive without Joe Alt. Mahomes was outstanding against Indianapolis only when extending plays, producing strong EPA on long developing throws, but he was disastrous in the quick game, generating negative EPA on throws under 2.5 seconds. The Chargers must therefore force him into structure by boxing and compressing the edges, avoiding upfield rush, and using a TCU-style mirror rush to contain escape lanes, force spot throws, flood intermediate windows, and build the pocket around him. This works because KC's quick game spacing and receiver separation are currently broken. The Chargers should pressure KC through the A-gap rather than the edge because Kansas City handled edge rush but struggled when the interior was dented. With LA's interior lacking natural push, they must cheat with LB mug fronts, simulated pressures, T/E and T/T crease stunts, and odd fronts with a tilted nose to stress Joe Thuney and Creed Humphrey in pass-off situations. Mahomes EPA under pressure has been catastrophically negative, so artificially generating interior stress is essential. The Chargers must also force fast decisions by pressing and matching at 7-10 yards, disrupting the first read, and rotating late after Mahomes commits his eyes, ensuring he must throw before the scramble opportunity activates. Defensively, the Chargers must defend the Chiefs' intermediate middle, the core of their offense, which is built on intermediate crossers, overs, quarter beaters, benders, and seam digs. Kansas City struggled against Indianapolis because the Colts eliminated intermediate leverage. The Chargers must play 6 or 8-man match walls in the intermediate areas, compensating for their own biggest weakness, linebackers biting on play action and losing depth on seams and crossers. Solutions include poach/MOD structures, robber rotations, and bracketing no. 2. In the intermediate, the coaching point is not to chase routes, but to occupy space and choke windows. Offensively, protecting Justin Herbert without Joe Alt defines the entire game plan, because the Chargers cannot run a normal drop-back pass game. They must cut the field and move the launch point through sprint outs, nakeds, half-roll boots, and GT counter keep action, all of which neutralize KC's wide 9 edges and prevent Herbert from standing still in a collapsing pocket. The Chargers must live in play action and RPOs, because KC is most vulnerable to play action crossing routes, overs, RPO glance slants, and Y-pop concepts, and because play action naturally slows the pass rush even without elite tackle play. Herbert's strength in micro-timing becomes the offensive advantage. He excels in rhythm throws, hashed-out timing, single-step glance windows, and isolation routes to McConkey. These timing-based elements force the Chiefs to defend horizontally and prevent their pass rush from simply teeing off vertically. In the run game, the Chargers must exploit Kansas City's vulnerability in neutral box fits and their tendency to overrun wide zone by using run structures that punish defensive speed. Counter, duo, GA counter, and split flow zone, because these schemes attack KC's flow aggression, create vertical displacement, open the bootleg game, and force Nick Bolton into conflict, where he struggles when wrong-footed. Los Angeles should also attack horizontally, with Kamani Vidal through outside zone paired with orbit motion, TE pin-pull designs, and toss-crack variations, taking advantage of Kansas City's shallow linebacker depth and forcing them to defend sideline to sideline. In the pass game, Lad McConkey must be the primary target against Joshua Williams or Jalen Watson, as KC protects its weaker corners by rotating them, and McConkey excels at defeating off-man, match quarters, and zone-turn defenders, especially on intermediate option routes and deep crossers off play action. Oronde Gadsden II should be featured in the middle of the field, where KC's undersized safeties struggle against his frame, creating natural high-low conflicts, forcing robber commitment and generating red zone mismatches. Running backs should mating travel high-low conflicts, forcing robber commitment and generating red zone mismatches. Running backs should be leveraged against KC's linebackers with screens, arrows, and Texas routes, since Bolton and Chenal are downhill players rather than coverage matchups. From a possession standpoint, the Chargers must starve Mahomes by forcing long fields, eliminating explosive RPO and play action seams, and making the Chiefs play patiently. This requires bleeding clock with 10-12 play drives, running on early downs to stay on schedule, living in third and manageable, and punting to the right hash to restrict KC's boundary spacing. Momentum affects Kansas City more than any elite team, so controlling tempo and forcing boredom is strategically advantageous. In the red zone, Louisiana should exploit KC's weaknesses, despite their ability to compress space, by using RB perimeter touches, TE crossers, backside glance RPOs, and 2-on-1 conflicts against rotating safeties. Effective calls include Y-over play action, orbit jet motion with Vidal, pin pull counter bash, and Herbert keepers off GT counter. Ultimately, the Chargers' blueprint condenses into 6 requirements. Compress Mahomes' pocket, rather than chasing him through mirror rush and gap pressure games. Eliminate intermediate crossers with match walls and robber help. Protect Herbert through movement-based designs, boots, sprints, and RPOs. Rather than pure blocking, run counter, duo, and split zone to punish KC's flow. Feature McConkey and Gadsden in leverage-driven matchups, and possession strangle the game by bleeding clock and shortening total drives. For the Chargers' defense over the last 3 to 5 weeks, the critical stats are EPA and yards per attempt allowed versus crossers, seams, and overs, pressure rate with 4, 5, and 6-man rush, how much depth the linebackers lose versus play action your worst split, coverage success by type quarters, match, cover 3, and man and explosive percentage allowed in both the run and pass game. That defensive profile tells you how to structure the anti-Mahomes plan precisely. The framework is that, league-wide, a plus 0.10 to plus 0.10 defeat EPA per play advantage over an opponent typically translates to something like a 60-70% win probability over a full game, depending on total plays, turnovers, and field position, and larger EPA gaps push that win chance higher, roughly 0.00 EPA per play. Advantage is about a 50% win chance, plus 0.05 moves it into the low 50s, plus 0.10 into the low 60s, and plus 0.cut if team plus 0.20 into the 70-80% range. The goal is to estimate, for each strategy, a plausible net EPA per play swing versus the Chiefs and then translate that into a rough Chargers win chance. For offensive strategy packages, 4 offensive identities are defined, with estimates of how each affects both Chargers' offensive EPA per play and Chiefs' offensive EPA per play via pace and possession geometry, all expressed as EPA deltas relative to a baseline game plan, where the baseline win chance is around 40% versus the Chiefs. The baseline assumption is that with no special planning, the Chiefs are about 3 5-point favorites, which gives the Chargers roughly a 42% chance to win. Strategy 01 is run/play action control with movement, where the Chargers call 45-50% early down runs counter, duo, split zone, GH counter, lean on heavy play action, boots, and sprint outs to protect the edge without Joe Alt. Target Lad McConkey and Oronde Gadsden II on intermediate crossers, option routes, and seams, and intentionally bleed clock with 10-12 play drives when possible. In this structure, the run game doesn't need huge efficiency. Even plus 0.00 to plus 0.05 EPA on the ground is fine if it keeps you on schedule, while play-action passing can realistically give you plus 0.05 to plus 0.10 over your normal dropback EPA, and protection is structurally helped by movement, which reduces catastrophic negative EPA events like sacks and strip sacks. That yields an estimated net offensive EPA delta of about plus 0.05 to plus 0.08. On defense, this style produces fewer total possessions for Mahomes, around 9, 10 instead of 11, 12. So even if the Chiefs' offensive EPA per play doesn't drop dramatically, their game-level EPA falls because of volume suppression and longer fields. That yields an effective EPA delta versus baseline of perhaps plus 0.03 to plus 0.05 in the Chargers' favor. So the combined net EPA differential Chargers minus Chiefs is in the range of about plus 0.08 to plus 0.k for translating that into win probability. A plus 0.08 EPA differential gives roughly a 55-58% win chance, while plus 0.12 pushes it toward the 60-65% range. So the estimated win chance with 01 is approximately 58-62% if it's executed well, and the defense is at least league average against Kansas City. Strategy 02 is spread, pass heavy Herbert hero ball, with a 65-70% pass rate, lots out of empty and 11 personnel sets, more deep developing concepts and vertical shots, and a plan built around Herbert outscoring Mahomes in a shootout while offering minimal help to the backup left tackle and calling more true dropbacks. The offensive EPA per play ceiling is high in this approach, When it works, Herbert can post plus 0.20 EPA per play stretches, but backups facing the Chiefs' pass rush mean higher sack and turnover risk and more volatile EPA. So a realistic expectation against a playoff-level defense without Joe Alt is a net offensive EPA delta of about 0.00 to plus 0. 0.3. Defensively, this style generates more possessions and a higher total play count, giving Mahomes more drives and more explosive opportunities, and likely increasing Kansas City's offensive EPA per play relative to baseline, because they get more cracks at your defense and more short fields after negative offensive plays. That yields a net combined EPA differential for the Chargers of roughly 0.03 to 0.07. Even if Herbert plays well, the overall geometry of the game tilts toward a Mahomes-favored script, mapping that to win probability. An EPA differential of 0.03 suggests roughly a 35-40% Chargers win chance, while 0.07 suggests about 30-35%. So the estimated win chance with O2 is around 32-38%. This makes O2 the fun, but dumb plan against Mahomes and a top defensive coordinator when your starting left tackle is out. Strategy O3 is an extreme ball control approach that becomes conservative to a fault. The core idea is to lean heavily on the run with a very low early down pass rate, generate very few explosive plays, avoid risk at all costs, punt often, and try to win a 20-17 type game with defense alone. The offensive EPA per play in this structure suffers because you create too many low-value second and 8 and 3rd and 7 situations. The lack of explosives caps your scoring ceiling, and against an aggressive Chiefs defense you become predictable. As a result, the net offensive EPA delta is roughly 0.05 to 0.10. Defensively, while you do slow the game down, the low scoring pressure allows the Chiefs to remain patient, lean into their best structures, and pick their spots for explosives. You get some reduction in their total EPA, but not enough to offset your own offensive drag, leaving the net combined EPA differential Chargers minus Chiefs around 0.05 to 0.12. Translating that into win probability, an EPA differential of 0.05 puts you in the mid-30s% range, while 0.12 drops you into the high 20s, so the estimated win chance with O3 is only about 36%. This style is essentially playing not to lose against Mahomes, which usually leads to a loss. Strategy O4, by contrast, is a hybrid model, attack early, then shift into control, and is probably the optimal offensive shape. The idea is that for the first 2 or 3 drives, the Chargers use a more aggressive pass rate with scripted shots, play-action crossers, and a sprinkle of tempo. Then after securing any lead or maintaining a tie into the mid-second quarter, they pivot into the O1 structure of ball control, play-action, and movement-based protection. Throughout, they must always protect the backup left tackle with chips, motion, reduced splits, boots, nakeds, and screens. In terms of offensive EPA per play, the early aggression gives a chance at 1 or 2 cheap positive EPA spike drives and once ahead. Bleeding clock with efficient runs and play action produces a realistic game-level EPA delta of about plus 0.07 to plus 0.w. A soft zone philosophy D3 that keeps everything in front with conservative shells and minimal blitzing slightly lowers explosive plays, but allows Kansas City to slowly solve spacing and string together high success rate drives. This produces a negligible EPA effect around 0.002, 0.03. Combining offensive and defensive strategies into a win condition table reveals how drastically different the outcomes become. Pairing O1 run/play action control with movement with D1 produces a net EPA differential between plus 0.10 and plus 0.18 and an estimated win probability of roughly 60-72%. The same offensive plan with D3 drops that differential to plus 0.05 to plus 0.11 and the win probability to around 55-63%. A pass-heavy hero ball. Plan O2 paired with D1 yields a modest positive EPA differential of plus 0.05 to plus 0.2 inert, and a win chance of about 55-66%. But with massive variance, greater chances of either losing big or winning big. O2 with 2, however, is one of the worst combinations. The offense adds little EPA, while the defense boosts Mahomes' efficiency, producing a net differential of 0.02 to 0.09, and win odds of only 30-45%, essentially trying to out-Mahomes Mahomes. An over-conservative offense, 03 paired with D1, produces a net differential of 0.10 to 0.00 and a 35-45% win chance. The optimal combination, 04 aggressive early, then shift to control with D1, generates the highest net EPA differential of plus 0.12 to plus 0.22 and win probabilities in the 65-78% range, assuming solid execution. Overall, the model says the primary win condition is a defense built on mirror rush, a gap stress, and intermediate match/robber coverage, combined with an offense that starts aggressively before shifting into a movement-based run and play action structure. As secondary, higher variance win condition allows Herbert to remain aggressive as long as protection is built through movement, chips, and rhythm timing. And the approaches that quietly ruin the Chargers' chances are overly conservative offense, high blitz defensive plans, and any drop-back-heavy structure behind a backup left tackle. If you provide the actual offensive and defensive EPA splits for both teams, this analysis can be turned into a full numerical Monte Carlo simulation with win percentages, scoring distributions, and blowout risk profiles. Using a simple Monte Carlo model with shared assumptions, roughly 65 offensive plays per team, point differential modeled as a normal distribution with mean equal to BAP/play multiplied by 65 and standard deviation of 13 points, and 100,000 simulated games per strategy. We can translate EPA advantages directly into win probabilities for the Chargers against the Chiefs. The resulting win condition table shows how each offensive-defensive pairing performs when simulated repeatedly. The 04 plus D1 combination aggressive early, then control, paired with mirror rush and a gap match, defense carries a BEPA/play of plus 0.18, an expected point differential of plus 11.7, and an 81.8% simulated win rate. 01 plus D1 run and play action control with movement, paired with mirror/A gap/match defense posts a plus 0. 14 EPA differential, a plus 9. 1 expected margin, and a 75.8% win rate. A pass-heavy Herbert approach supported by D102 plus D1 produces a plus 0.09 EPA advantage, a plus 5.9 margin, and a 67.4% win rate, though with higher variance. 01 plus D3 play action control, paired with soft zone, still generates a positive EPA differential of plus 0.08 and a plus 5.2 margin, but drops to a 65.5% win rate because soft zone helps Mahomes stay efficient. The baseline plan, with no strategic tilt, has a neutral EPA differential, a 0.0 margin, and roughly coin flip odds at 49.6%. The two Lozon style combinations, 03 plus D1 ultra-conservative offense despite good defense, and 02 plus D2 shootout plus high blitz, effectively feeding Mahomes explosives, both generate 0.05 EPA/play, a 3.3-point differential in Herbert and 40.0% respectively. Interpreting the results, the model says the best path by far is 04 plus D1. Start aggressively for 2 to 3 drives with shots, play action, and tempo, then shift into run/play action control with movement-based protection while the defense uses mirror rush, a gap pressure, and match/robber rules to delete intermediate crossers, which together produce an 82% win rate if that plus 0.18 EPA edge is sustained. The next best approach is 01 plus D1, which uses boots, sprints, and possession control to protect the left tackle and starve Mahomes of possessions, yielding about a 76% win rate. 02 plus D1 offers around 67% odds by relying on Herbert's passing ability while still containing Mahomes with match-based defense, though the volatility is far higher. 01 plus D3 remains viable but drops to about 66% because soft zone gives Mahomes too much room. Finally, the inherently self-sabotaging approaches over conservative offense or high blitz shootout defense sit around a 40% chance, showing that stylistic mismatches can erase otherwise favorable elements of the game plan.